everybody, and welcome to the Burn Network. I am RM, and of course, tonight we have with us Catherine Cook. Catherine, how are you tonight?
Good.
Well, it's great to have you here. You and I are going to be doing a recap of Ahsoka season one, and it certainly was a very interesting season. There's a lot that they've given us in this season, a lot of twists and turns, and a lot of things that I personally wasn't expecting, or at least was surprised by. We're going to be talking about all of that tonight. Catherine, you and I have been covering the series from the beginning, and it certainly has been a journey for this series. I think that both of us noticed certain things about the series that I personally think was pretty good, is the fact that it looked really good. I think that, they accomplished, this production team accomplished such great work by making it look really nice. I didn't really see a whole bunch of flaws in it for me. What did you think about the production value of Ahsoka season one?
Better than Kenobi and better than Mandalorian season 3. So the production values were good. It looked good. For the most part, there's some questionable CG and stuff, but for the most part, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, it was a relief to not have those, what I like to call unforced errors of things that we would expect to see that feel a little out of the ordinary. However, we did have some occurrences in the series that kind of went into the realm, at least for me, that were not as easy to accept or even, imagine. We did have a few scenarios where we saw, a person fighting against a droid, and it seemed a little unrealistic, or even somebody, the lightsaber piercing was a kind of a topic of discussion for many people. But beyond that, and you mentioned some of the special effects, I thought it was okay, but this was not the series that I thought we were going to be getting. Catherine, from the trailers and from what you've heard, let's say prior to the series, do you think that the marketing of the show was what you expected it was going to be?
I didn't really pay attention to the marketing, so I won't know.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one trailer and I was like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I think the marketing of the show presented something, a show that looked like it was going to be incredibly exciting, that there were going to be these spectacular moments, almost things that we haven't seen before. But to be honest with you, Catherine, a good portion of the show felt like stuff that we had seen before. In fact, there was an entire episode that was almost a recreation of some of the highlights of Ahsoka's life in the Clone Wars. And, it was just kind of, let's see if we can replicate this in live action. So for me, when I look at this series, my first thought is, although it looks good, one of the main points, or at least what I think Filoni was trying to do, was to kind of make a showcase of Ahsoka, kind of show anybody, regardless of whether they've watched the Clone Wars, regardless of whether they've watched Rebels, just a showcase of Ahsoka and her past, and that she has a rich past. And by the way, if you don't know it, maybe you should go ahead and watch these other series. Did you get that impression from, let's say episode 5, where it was so heavily based on previous experiences that Ahsoka had? Or did you think it was something else?
Well, yeah, that was clearly bad writing because it had no bearing on the story, and he just threw it in there. And it's like, why do you feel the need to explain that, but not all the stuff with the Rebels characters? But we already went over that from the first, because we've already covered the first 6 episodes of the series. But no need for me to espouse on that again and all the problems there. But yeah, it's like, it doesn't make sense why he would feel the need to tell them about her in a show that she's barely in, but he didn't feel the need to tell people about, like, who is Thrawn exactly in this universe, why is Ezra and them there. It's like, so to prioritize telling us what Ahsoka's feelings are when she's barely in the series and to waste a whole episode on it is very bizarre. Not very good writing.
Yeah, it is very bizarre. And, of course, you and I haven't had a chance to really talk about episodes 7 and 8. So if the memory serves me correctly, and we can do that now, but I couldn't help but make those points because of the manner upon which this series has ended. And, kind of, I think it was a little foolhardy in a sense, because we didn't necessarily get any closure. And you had mentioned in some previous episodes that it often felt like the episode hadn't even ended. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't feel like this series ended. What do you think?
Well, yeah, because I was on board with it for a while, and then yeah, I thought the fifth episode was a bit filler, and then when they mentioned in the sixth episode that the witches have telepathy, it's like, well, you could have just telepathically told them the coordinates, and we could have saved a bunch of time. And because apparently these shows are budgeted around 6 or 8 episodes each, so I assumed going into these last 2 episodes that we were going to get some more answers, like what exactly has been going on here for the last 10 years. Why is it if Thrawn's Star Destroyer can still fly around in space that he hasn't explored the other neighboring planets? Why? Uh, are they like, why is Thrawn not interested in hunting down Ezra, who took him all the way out here away from everything? Why did we not get Thrawn's reaction to finding out that the Empire fell, even though he's obsessed with like restarting it? What exactly is his benefit from helping the witches other than getting home? Like, what is his goal here? Like, we know that Project Necromancer was referenced in the season 3 finale of Mandalorian. Well, why didn't we learn more about that? Why was Ezra, so chill when Sabine shows up, and why was he so chill when she told him, oh, by the way, the Empire collapsed? And it's like, it didn't evoke any emotion from him. And, oh, but the Emperor might be alive, so they say. And I'm like, well, no, because Luke Skywalker would have told people that the Emperor's dead, and he's pretty reliable. So it just didn't really answer anything. Kind of like we mentioned in one of the earlier episodes about how they'll probably never tell us why Grogu was on Arvala 7 in the hands of all those mercenaries. It's just something that just kind of happened. And so here we are again, where we're getting into a series which was built around all this great mystery. And other than seeing literally where they are, we don't really understand the context of what's been going on or why. And then to reveal later on that there's like a Mortis connection, it's like, well, did Thrawn know about that? And it's like it's a show which keeps, the character arcs don't really end. It's like the story just kind of ended, and it doesn't feel like a complete story. Like Thrawn's escape at the end of the 8th episode is the inverse of what happened at the end of Rebels season 4. And it should have been just as dramatic, but it really wasn't, because there was no sense of urgency amongst the characters to stop him. None of the characters seemed to care that they failed. None of the heroes, that is. And it's just, it's sort of like content for the sake of content. Like, the story will continue now. It's like, well, you've had over 5.5 years to think about this from when Rebels ended. We're finally here, and this should be a really big dramatic moment. It just didn't feel that way.
Yeah, it really didn't. And, kind of looking at this also from the point of view of, there's that scene where Hera, I guess so late in the game, is being sort of like reprimanded for her actions, if you will. It's like, it's kind of late for this. And yet here she is at a position. And of course, C-3PO shows up. Did you expect that there should have been some kind of appearance by Princess Leia here? Or do you think that this entire contrived scene was completely unnecessary?
So, first of all, regarding the Leia thing, no, because I'm not a fan of doing the CGI ghoulish Tarkin thing. Like, don't do that. 3PO's fine. However, there's really no reason to have this scene show up as late in the season as it is, because it seems so small time compared to what's going on in Peridia that it feels like it's only there for the sake of giving Hera a scene. It's like, why is it? Could you write a better story where Hera could actually be there with them? It's like, why is she here? Like, you could have written a story where Zeb went off with them, even, and it just doesn't feel, and it's further showing the incompetence of the New Republic. The fact that Mon Mothma doesn't even stick up for her. Nobody's suspicious as to why a high-profile prisoner's been sprung. You had this massive hyperspace drive built under your nose. Obviously, they have information that you don't, and they're not curious about it. And it's like, once again, we're 40 chapters into the whole Mandoverse story now, and they haven't really defined what the New Republic is or what it really consists of. And then to have a scene like this, it just felt really contrived to make us see, oh, how can you not believe Hera? But it doesn't really amount to anything because she doesn't do anything. So, like, why is it here this late in the game? It's like, no.
Yeah, and I also wondered, why is it that Mon couldn't have just said, look, I ordered this, and just call it a day? This guy, it felt like this other senator had a lot more power than he should have. And there was no reason for this to even go this far. But, this is something they wanted to have, this involvement with this character. And so, I think that's why they did it. But it seemed kind of ridiculous. You mentioned the part where they all get back together. I think it's this next one here.
Mm.
where, you know, finally, I guess Ahsoka is there. And it does seem a little anticlimactic. Again, another reunion, although she is glad to see Ezra, it does feel very anticlimactic. Catherine, why are these reunions so anticlimactic?
Just bad writing on Dave's part. It's like you've been looking for Thrawn in this, and Ahsoka doesn't even ask Ezra anything about specifics of what's been going on here for the last 10 years. What happened? And frankly, she's not a very interesting protagonist because there's no central conflict for her. She barely has any screen time. They spent the one primarily Ahsoka centric episode, which was the 5th episode, was, to your point, spent on reiterating things about her from Clone Wars and Rebels we already knew for people who weren't in the know. And the thing which she would be most curious about, which we know she's been trying to do, which is find Thrawn, and she just doesn't seem to. She's just so blasé about everything. Like Ezra, even in the 7th episode, doesn't piece it together that, oh, Sabine didn't just happen to find me. Which, how is he not curious about that? But oh, the fact that the bad guys are here. Oh, now they're getting away. It's like, Sabine, what did you do? And Ahsoka writes it off as fate, like, you know, the will of the Force or whatever. And it's like, well, why is there no dramatic tension here? Like, not for the sake of having it, but it feels like it should be there. And if Sabine has been dumbed down as a character, that if this whole thing exists to explain, you know, somehow Palpatine returned, Project Necromancy and all that, then this is the origin point. You could trace it back to Baylan just asking her to open the map, and she did it instead of destroying it. And it's like, wow, all the death and destruction of the New Republic and all the death and terror that the First Order and the Final Order are going to inflict on the universe is just because Sabine wanted to see Ezra again. It's like, it felt so empty, and that there's like, even if you gave her a bit of regret, it would have been better, or have her. But the fact that she sees Thrawn had an evil plan when she showed up, and she's not even interested in telling Ezra about it, and let's get going. And even when Ahsoka shows up, it's like, I don't really get what the meaning is to that. So that was just very bizarre. Now, I did like seeing Ezra actually fight without a lightsaber and actually using the Force in a way that seems logical when you don't have a weapon. That was actually something I've been waiting to see in Star Wars for a long time.
Right.
But and those two characters, my God, Hati and Baylan. It's like, why are they not involved in the climax of a show where they are the primary supporting villains? It's like, I get that Baylan is on his own quest and they don't want to interfere that too much. Well, you could still write it to have him involved in the primary action of the climax and still have him go on to do whatever he's doing. But it just felt so bizarre. It's like, wait, what happened to these two? Where are they? Kept waiting for them to show up.
Yeah, it was kind of like, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but it was kind of like, you know, you have a friend who, takes everybody's wallets and charges steals all their bank accounts, charges everything. You don't see them for a few years, and then suddenly you see them at a party, and it's like, hey, how are you? How you been? You know, like it's got a very kind of almost as if, you know, they really should be caring a lot more. And it was interesting to see Ezra make a comment about not having a lightsaber. Obviously, he didn't have one, and he's had to do without, perhaps, whatever the reason is. But it is very interesting at how even he seems like somewhat unchanged, considering he's on a planet like that. He should be very different. I mean, almost maybe even in the impression, he should have been impressed in the Force or whatever kind of Force, you know, presence is on that planet, Catherine. Why does he seem like he was the same, just as if he was in Rebels?
Bad writing. I mean, it's like, we know from the beginning of Rebels that he was kind of lonely, a bit of a loner, but then over time, when he meets the Ghost crew, they become his surrogate family, and how that's what made that 4th season finale so dramatic, is that you really feel how palpable that is, that he's leaving them and his family's breaking up. And now that he's been on this, for lack of a better term, like a dead planet, with these witches and these bandits and this dark magic, and he's just so chill about everything. It's like, no, if you have your family torn away from you like that and you're literally on your own, sure, he's found the Na'ti, but it's like, he's just so chill, like nothing's happened. And that's what's so bizarre. It's like, I was willing to write off the really bad reunion with him and Sabine at the end of the 6th episode. I'm like, okay, we're going to get into this. Well, the whole 7th episode, the only thing that's really accomplished is Ahsoka meets up with them and Baylan abandons Hati. That's about it. And then Thrawn starts loading the ship to leave. And it was about 40 minutes long, but it felt like it didn't really, like, that would have been the perfect episode to fill us in on all of this stuff. Give us some more of that dramatic tension. There's just none of it there. It's again overconfidence in the brand that, oh well, we can slap a Star Wars name on it, it's going to work. And oh, because we've been stringing people along like an Apocalypse Now type journey to the way off in the distance to find these people, that just presenting them will be enough. We don't need to actually have a story to back it up. And as cool as these characters are here, the witches, and how great they look in live action, and the alleged connections to other Star Wars lore that they might be doing deep dives into, it's like your focus is primarily on Thrawn, the hunt for Thrawn, and what's Ezra been up to. It's like, just because you found out where they are, that doesn't really tell us about what's been going on. Like, you have this throwaway line in the finale where it's mentioned that Thrawn is the one who woke up the witches. It's like, well, number one, how did he do that? Number two, if the idea is that he studied their culture from their hieroglyphs on the temple and realized, hey, we can help each other get out of here, then you should show that to demonstrate to the audiences who don't know Thrawn that what makes him a threat, that's his MO. He studies your culture and your religions and is really able to work at that, almost like a Sherlock Holmes type of guy. And we don't really get to see that in these two final episodes. He's just kind of there. And while I liked Lars's performance, it's like there's nothing really. It's like, really, you're gonna finally reveal something this weird, and there's nothing really behind it to prop it up. It's just, like you mentioned, more cliffhangers, no real ending. It's like trying to string you along, and how long are you going to put up with it, because Kenobi obviously is not a part of the Mandoverse, because that's in another era. Neither is Andor. But through 3 seasons of Mandalorian, 1 season of Book of Boba Fett, now 1 season of Ahsoka, that's 40 episodes of storytelling. And the idea that it's all building up to a movie, it's like, it doesn't feel like it's building up to anything just because some characters cross over and it's chronologically it's going on around the same time. But this seems like such a big deal. Like, I can't imagine, again, going back to Book of Boba Fett, when Ahsoka went to Luke's planet, like, why would Luke not be interested in helping her for whatever it is that she's doing? Is it because they never did say why she was there? Is it because he thinks maybe you should just leave Thrawn and Ezra alone, like leave a sleeping dog lie? Okay, maybe we should have heard that. But once she had evidence that something big is going on, why didn't she go back to Luke saying, hey, man, we need you? And because this is a time where you really don't have another Jedi except for Ahsoka, it's like that would be something that, yeah, you might need to bring out the big guns for this, especially when the New Republic's not going to help them. But again, there's no real resolution to this story, and it just raises all sorts of fascinating questions, but doesn't attempt to answer any.
Yeah, it is quite puzzling in a sense. And, at first, these Night Sisters look incredibly strong and as if they're in charge. But then we kind of get this uncertainty, like who's making the decisions? I can't follow what the true motivations of anyone is, or even how scared I'm supposed to be. In fact, I'm not scared of any of these people. I'm just really surprised at the reputation that Thrawn has had. Even when I saw him in Rebels, I was terrified of Thrawn and what Thrawn could do. I'm not terrified here, Catherine. I'm just not scared.
Yeah, because once again, I had to pull out the reference books and do a deep dive on Wikipedia to figure out what's going on. And once I found out what the lore is, I'm like, well, if this is the answer, then that's really good, but it needs to be in the show so we understand it. It's like, because you're not going to tell us exactly, because from the most that we can gather from just watching this without diving into any reference books, is that the witches want to restart their coven on Dathomir, and that they're taking the coffins with them. Well, that begs the question, why do they not like staying on Peridia anymore? Because we've seen Dathomir. It looks like a pretty dead planet. Why did they want to leave? That's the first question. Well, we don't know. What did they promise them in terms of Project Necromancer? Well, we can surmise from The Rise of Skywalker what Project Necromancer is ultimately going to be, given that Thrawn is obsessed with resurrecting the Empire. Well, why aren't we just saying that? Because it seems kind of obvious. So maybe you could just let the characters actually say that for a change, so we could see where we're going with it. Like, they even had Sabine say, oh, the Emperor might be dead, so they say. It's like, well, obviously they're teasing that to the audience, for the slower members of the audience, that this is where this is all leading to. But again, it was like, what is the witch's primary motivation? Like, why do they want to go back to Dathomir? Why aren't they ruling this kingdom or this whole galaxy? Well, we don't know, because the show doesn't want to tell us.
Yeah, it is. It's a puzzlement, and we do keep seeing these, like, I would say, little teasers of Anakin everywhere. We're told that there's 20 episodes. Like, to be very specific, I think any other person on Earth would say, Yeah, he recorded some training materials for me, and I was just looking at the last one, but I don't think anybody would say, Catherine, that there's like 22 episodes, or that there's a certain number of episodes. Like, no one would say that. I almost wondered whether or not that's going to come up. There's going to be these episodes released, these lost training episodes of Anakin Skywalker to his Padawan, but it was just so specific and so awkward in that sense. What do you think?
Well, it's odd because at this point in time, when he would have recorded this sometime during the Clone Wars, he doesn't know that the Republic is going to become an empire and he's going to become Darth Vader. All this evil stuff there's no reason for him to think that he's not going to be able to give her these lessons in person. So why is he recording them at all? Like, why isn't she there with him? Like, she's not going to be off doing her own mission while he's going to be there with her as her master, unless some reason they get separated. And the only time they really got separated for an extended period of time was in the season 3 finale when she gets captured by the Trandoshan slavers or whatever. But it's not like he's going to be spending that time. Oh, I guess I should just record these on the off chance they find. It's like, no. It's like there's no internal logic to this. It's there because they figure, oh, fan service. They like seeing Hayden again. Same thing again, Book of Boba Fett. Let's just have Ahsoka and Luke in the same frame for the sake of doing it, but let's not explain. Well, like, why is she there exactly? Oh, she's just there to tell Din Djarin that maybe it's not a good idea to take Grogu away from his training. But like, well, why are you there? It's like there's no internal logic to being presented. You just have to grasp at straws and do again. Like I had to do a deep dive on the implications of that final shot in the show to figure out what's been going on here, or what in all likelihood is going on here that's been driving the motivation for the witches and all of that.
Yeah, and even with the deep dive and certainly I'm happy for people who enjoyed these episodes, and I'm very happy for them. You guys enjoy them, relish them. I like to hear when people do enjoy the episodes. But the more I thought about that part of the story, the less I became interested in it, Catherine, because Baylan Skoll has become the breakout star, as far as I'm concerned, of this series. And he became more and more and more interesting. In fact, his comments made sense. They were more profound. I didn't like that he ditched Hati. I didn't like that, but that's okay. That's something they felt he had to do. But then as this series has gone on, he didn't even have to speak anymore. His presence, even in this shot, which I think looks great, where he's kind of looking in the direction that the statue is pointing, you can't see his hand. But the point is, Catherine, this character didn't even have to speak and made more sense. What did you think about that? Do you think that was the intention in the show? Or was just a consequence of the way that the show was presented?
Like in terms of us being able to know what he's up to?
And also be more interested in his story than anyone else.
A lot of it, I think, has to do with how great Ray Stevenson is in that role. His acting, his performance is really spot on, and that makes it a lot more intriguing. The fact that from the beginning he's been sort of playing both sides. He's doing what he needs to do to get what he wants, and what he wants is here. Like he abandoned Hati because he says, "Oh, you're too ambitious, and I trained you to be better." And oh, you want to go off and fight? Fine, do it. And he just leaves her behind as if she's not mature enough or disciplined enough for whatever it is that he's doing. And then we see here the Argonath, as it clearly is, and he's standing there looking out at what eagle-eyed viewers have noticed, that you can actually see the Mortis temple way off in the distance in the lightning like we saw from the series. And it's like, well, wouldn't Thrawn be interested in this? Or maybe the witches told him all about it, and that's why they want to leave. Because the deep dive is, of course, the Legends continuity storyline about the mother. Because even in the Mortis trilogy that's in canon, we know that the father and the son and the daughter are mortals, or they were originally, because he was ready to recruit Anakin to be his replacement. So somehow once you accept that position, they're granted these unbelievable powers, which means there would have had to have been a mother somewhere. And the idea is that, taking a clear Christian allegory from, the Adam and Eve story, she doesn't like that her children and her husband are all immortal and all that. So she, drinks from the font of power, bathes in the pool of knowledge, both featured in the Mortis arc. And that turns her evil. And so because she committed the sin, the original sin of you shouldn't have done this. And so she gets banished to this faraway planet. And now that the Mortis gods are gone, she's, like a siren calling out to somebody in the cosmos, like this, much like a siren is like very beautiful, very enchanting, and it turns out to be very evil. And she's apparently been calling to Baylan, again, assuming that that's what they're going for. And Ahsoka saying it might be fate that I ended up here. Well, yeah, because she's got the spirit of the daughter in her. That's why you see the Morai at the end there, And if that's the reason why the witches want to leave, because according to the lore, Abeloth is this all-consuming evil entity that just absorbs and destroys everything, which would possibly explain why the witches chose to go in their own self-imposed hibernation, if you will, and why they want to leave Avalon or leave Peridia and go back to Dathomir to get as far away from her as possible. Maybe Thrawn respects that and decides, okay, I'll listen. Your guys are clearly more powerful than me. I'll just accept that and we'll get the hell out of here. But then you should say that. You should explain some of this, because that would actually make sense as to what the whole goal is about why the witches want to leave this planet and why Thrawn isn't interested in exploring these areas. But none of it's there to be explained. You have to dive into reference books and deep dives to figure out this stuff. And so looking at this shot at the end of the series, I'm like, okay, you're looking at Mortis, but then I was filled with all these questions. It's like, well, does Ezra know this is here? Does Thrawn know it's here? Did the witches know? It's like, why are we not talking about this? It's like, it's like, why are you leaving this to another season? Because it feels like the whole 3 episodes that are set on Peridia don't really accomplish anything. It's like, oh, hi, Ezra. Thrawn's like, okay, you guys, we'll get rid of these 2 dark Jedi mercenaries or whatever. Okay, let's take off now. We got the hyperspace ring. Bye. It's like, even that didn't need to be stretched into 3 episodes, but they found a way to do it without giving you much depth or content to it. Like even, and then all the plot armor in the finale, my God, in terms of just like when they're running under the Star Destroyer and it's raining down all that hellfire, I'm like, there's no way you're getting through that without it, unscathed. I mean, yeah, the zombies were cool because we've seen that in Clone Wars, so seeing that live action was kind of neat. But again, it's just like this doesn't feel as dramatic as it should. It's like this should be a hell or high water. We are going to stop Thrawn and the witches from getting the hell out of here. And it just didn't feel that. It felt like a mid-average kind of race to the top of the stairs. It didn't feel dramatic at all. Like even when she has the showdown with Morgan Elsbeth, who's been gifted this extra power by the witches, which I thought, okay, that's kind of a cool ritual. But then it doesn't really mean anything because she gets killed like a couple minutes later.
Yeah, that was not right. And I'm sorry, but Elspeth shouldn't have gone out like that. I mean, like I said, she still had that, yellow is the new black, running, everything from behind the prison walls. And she goes out and about. Felt like 5 minutes, Catherine. I mean, I can understand if it was over a season, but it literally happened 5 seconds after she was enhanced, if you will, by the Night Sisters. And I know it was cool to see those dark, troopers or whatever they are, but it was not satisfying to see them mow them down and then for them to come back to life. Like that was not exciting to me, Catherine. It felt like they were not accomplishing anything. At least if they could accomplish something, or at least if they made some head ground, I could say great. About the only thing that happened was that Ezra jumped on the ship. And that was not necessarily satisfying either, because that's a confrontation that should have taken place over the 10 years that Thrawn was there. What do you think?
Well, yeah, because it's like his Star Destroyer is functional. So I'm still trying to figure out, okay, Ezra, like they never explained once the Purgle brought them there and they got set down on the planet or whatever, how did Ezra get out of there and away from all of them? And why did he not, if he could escape Thrawn and all these other stormtroopers and all of that, then why didn't he like destroy the engine room or do something? It's like, remember in Clone Wars season 2 in the finale where Boba Fett is trying to kill Mace Windu and he gets a winning ticket to go on a tour of the Republic transport, and after his first assassination attempt fails, he goes and blows up the engine room, causing the ship to go down. Well, Ezra has a stormtrooper armor on at the end. He could do that. He could, even if he wants to wait till they get back to the Star Wars galaxy, he could still do that. Instead, he doesn't. I'll do you one better. Once he's in the hangar up there, since the ship he gets away on is obviously stolen from that hangar, he could literally have just jumped in that ship, flown right down there, picked up Ezra Sabine, and raced back and just gotten right back in the docking bay, because apparently none of the stormtroopers are paying attention. So it's like, because again, it's like, yeah, how did you get out of the Star Destroyer in the first place, and why did you not feel the need to stop them if you saw? He must have been aware that Thrawn, he's waking up the witches. They're doing something. They obviously have an evil plan, and yet he's just hanging out with the Hati, like, and it didn't even seem like they were very far away from where granted, they didn't tell you where Thrawn was specifically because his Star Destroyer had to go rendezvous at the Citadel thing. But, like, why is he not, it's like, he's not updating them as to what's been going on. It's like, I guess we're stranded here, and so I don't have to do any more homework. And it's like, really? You didn't notice the giant Argonath out there? You didn't go exploring to see these things? You didn't notice that there's all these witches out here? Oh, that Thrawn woke up. That's not suspicious to you at all? It's like, what are you doing? What have you been doing? And when he finally gets to meet Hera again, it's like, one, why do you still have the Stormtrooper armor on? He still has his clothes on underneath, street clothes, if you will. Two, why is he just being once again so blasé? It's like, dude, we gotta go. We gotta hit the ground running here. Thrawn's back. The witches are back. We gotta get, we gotta do something about this.
Well, even when, as you said, when Sabine told him information and he was listening to it, he didn't seem very fazed by it. And apparently we're not supposed to be very fazed by it either, because
yeah, because it's like the whole, we have 4 seasons of Rebels of them fighting the Empire and all the how much he hated the Empire for what they took from him and his family and all that. And she's like, oh yeah, the Empire's gone. It felt, oh really? Oh okay. It's like, what the hell? It's like, this is just not. And it's a shame because I thought they were going to stick the landing as the first 5 episodes, or little mistakes, but it was like, okay, we're on our way, and then the last 2 episodes happened.
And then, this part where Hati, as you already kind of spoke about it a little bit, here you can see Ahsoka extending out her hand to Hati saying, I can help you. And I thought to myself, what could Ahsoka really do? Because she hasn't done very much. And now she's offering help to somebody who's essentially tried to kill them twice. And I get it. She's got to extend the laurel, the peace thing. She has to be the peacemaker here. But honestly, I'm almost wondering if on this team anything goes. Hati doesn't need your help. She already knows that you run a loose ship, and she doesn't want a person like that. She wants somebody more strict, like Baylan, who has a direction. But then poor Hati goes off to, I guess, join that other group. I mean, I'm almost wondering, I think it was a mistake for him to kind of toss Hati to the side, because she's like a character that doesn't have a purpose anymore. I mean,
well, it's sort of like she kind of took the fact that because she really wanted to kill Sabine at the end of the 5th episode, and Baylan said, no, we're going to keep our promises. And she was like being very petty, and like she didn't like that. And that's why she's more motivated. That's why she's really marching out here. It's because she has this petty grievance against Sabine and Ahsoka for kind of besting her. It's kind of like in Attack of the Clones when Mace Windu holds Jango Fett at lightsaber point, and when Jango sees his opportunity, he jumps down into the arena to get back at Mace. He goes, oh, you put me at lights, I'm going to stop you. And that didn't work out. And it's like Hati is doing the same thing here. And Baylan's like, if you're going to be really petty about this stuff, you clearly aren't ready for what he wants to do, which is to bring balance to the Force, or apparently end the cycle of violence and all this kind of thing. So he's like, oh, maybe I misjudged you, type of thing. And he just kind of, drops her like a rock. And I guess Ahsoka is trying to say, I can help you, by trying to convince her of that. But Hati, of course, no, she's understood. It's like, no.
Yeah,
and we didn't get to learn anything else about her either throughout the whole series, really. Nothing. It's like she could just as easily have just been another one of those, like the other mercenary got killed in the 4th episode, the one that's just made of green mist. She could just as easily have been that, because there's nothing else to this character.
It's a shame that this got wasted, and she seemed to have such kind of like, let's say, a bright future, regardless of what side she was on. And now it just feels like she's in character limbo, and we were kind of brought along as if she was this force to be reckoned with, and now she doesn't seem like she has any importance at all. I mean, I didn't want her character to die, but if they had kept Elsbeth around, and Hati, if they had to sacrifice a character, this would have been the one that I would have chosen, because there was maybe not necessarily any other reason to keep her around. Like, what's the reason? Why sacrifice Elsbeth but keep Hati? Like, it doesn't make any sense if we're talking about characters that have a history and honestly look like they could have a future in the series. So it is very confusing, that choice. And I think that the notion of there not being any consequences, or you don't have to kill anybody, you have to do any of this stuff. Well, guess what? You did all that stuff and it didn't give you the end result you wanted. So it was not a result or a path that was rewarded in the show. In other words, if they had just done this stuff and it was the will of the Force that their choices was exactly what was supposed to happen, it would prevent this from happening, fine. But it didn't. So what was the purpose of all this? Like, it doesn't feel like it has the meaning or the brevity that it should. And, I also think that that's very interesting. However, we did get to see this live action show, which was honestly, as I said, the main reason why it was made was just to show that it could be done, and also to let other people know that these characters exist. You don't always get an opportunity to do a live action show, but I guess by being able to make up this Vision Quest, which I'm still not entirely convinced of, halfway through the series, all of a sudden Ahsoka had this inner conflict. And you and I did talk about it before, but I'm still not convinced that that was actually the case. I mean, I wasn't convinced in the series. I wasn't convinced in that episode, and nothing in the past had convinced us that she had this inner conflict. So that whole thing was just made up just so that he could do episode 5, which was in the movie theater. And I'm sure it was incredible, but I'm not really honestly believing that was her true nature.
Right. Well, it's the same thing with the whole Ahsoka the White. They're making the comparison like Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. It's like, well, they already did that in Rebels with her. So it's like they're reiterating things from Rebels. I'm like, if you're going to reiterate certain things in live action, then once again, you should be reiterating who Ezra and the Rebels crew are and what this story is about for people who haven't seen it yet. Because you call the show Ahsoka. Well, people who are fans of Ahsoka already know all this stuff about her, so we don't really need to reiterate it again. If you feel the need to reiterate it for people who aren't in the know, then you should have felt just as obligated to inform people about what this story is actually about. Like, who are these characters and these Rebels characters, and why should we care? Like, why should we care about the hunt for Ezra and Thrawn? But they didn't tell you anything about that. Now, granted, in their defense, fans have had plenty of time to look up on this. Like, Ahsoka mentions where's Thrawn in season 2 of Mandalorian, which that episode aired in late November 2020. So they've November 27th, I believe. So that it's been 2 years and 9 months since between that her saying that and this show beginning, that they've had time to go back and watch it if they wanted to. And that's their loss, I suppose, if they didn't. But if you're going to play the game where we need to reiterate things, well, then you need to reiterate all of it to make it clear to people, and they don't do that here. And like you said, it's like they're trying to make it seem like she has an inner conflict, but she really doesn't. It was just there because he wanted to show Clone Wars stuff in live action for, fan service.
Absolutely. I also want to ask you about Huyang, who seems to me is another incredible character that I can't get enough of. I feel like this could have been the key to the series. And if they had kind of upped his role a little bit in the series and given us more information through Huyang, let's say you don't want your main character, you don't want Ahsoka explaining everything. You don't want all these people explaining everything. Huyang is the person who likes to explain things very technically and has all that information. And he's the record keeper. He's the bookkeeper. I almost feel like this whole series should have been told from his point of view, where he is explaining to you what happened as he's telling you the history of Ahsoka Tano, the legend of Ahsoka Tano, or even make it a legend, the legend of Ahsoka Tano. And he's telling people 10,000 years in the future about what happened, how she defeated Thrawn and what happened, make it legendary status. And I think that might have been something that would have interested people more, because this didn't come across as feeling very legendary. It kind of felt very, and I've heard people say this, and there's nothing wrong with making a show for children, but the plot level and the level of complexity, it was very childlike. And, I think we were expecting a more sophisticated Ahsoka Tano because she's older now. And we want to see that level. In fact, I would think that since Ahsoka Tano has had so much training through the Jedi, military training, all this stuff, she should be almost as tactically smart as Thrawn, a good challenger, someone who can anticipate movement and things like that. Why shouldn't she be? I mean, what do you think, Catherine?
Yeah, she spent all this time looking for Thrawn, and she knows what Thrawn's whole game is and what makes him so much of a threat. And yet, even though she was expecting the New Republic to send a whole brigade, it's like, well, you need to have contingencies. Thrawn has contingencies, and your plan was just to go guns a-blazing and running through the front door, basically, and thought that was going to work, right? And then other weird things, like why does Huyang have kyber crystals on him? Because the younglings would get their crystals themselves. Why does he have spare kyber crystals? He just happens to have Kanan's lightsaber pieces with him on it, like he carries that with him, I guess. But the point was raised that because of the beginning of the 6th episode, when he's telling the story, he says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that he's the one who was writing all the scrolls for the opening crawls for each of the movies, and he's the one telling the story. And it's like, okay, but if he's telling the story and anticipating all this, like maybe you should pass on some of that wisdom to Ahsoka, because they didn't really express, again, there wasn't, to your point, not much wisdom in terms of, like, Ahsoka's just kind of blasé the whole time, and like, why are you not being smarter? Like Anakin. Yeah, Anakin's kind of bullheaded too, but he has his contingencies and backups. That's part of what made Clone Wars fun. And we don't really see that here. And like Thrawn, even when he gets Ahsoka's background, he's like, oh, she was trained by Anakin. And he expects her to be bullish, but he should also expect contingencies, but she doesn't bring any, so he doesn't expect any, and they just kind of even when Morgan Elsbeth says, oh, she's just one person, and he says, oh, we shouldn't underestimate her, we're not making that mistake again. It's like, well, then by that logic, shouldn't you have hunted down Ezra to the ends of the planet and killed him? It's like, what? It just doesn't come together. Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel very disjointed. So it is interesting, though, that you're right. He seemed to have everything on the ship convenient for Ezra to go ahead and build. And I think, it was uncomfortable hearing, let's say, a former Jedi or a Jedi who we know uses a lightsaber to refuse a lightsaber. That was it didn't feel right to hear that. In any circumstance, you just pick up whatever weapon you can use. And then he talked about how he only needs a force. And I think that's what he's been telling himself. Let's say if he didn't have a saber for so long, Catherine, he's been telling himself that for 10 years because he hasn't had one. And the notion of saying, gee, I wish I had a lightsaber with me is something that he could not fulfill because he couldn't build one. He didn't have a crystal, whatever the limitation was. But that's something that he had been repeating to himself. At least that's how I look at it. And the notion of it being presented, he's like, I don't want an old saber. Now I want to build a new one. So I do like the notion of him wanting to build his lightsaber, because that's traditionally what we would expect to see from a Jedi, is to build your own saber. And this new saber now should be something that's remarkable. I'm not saying it has to be anything special, but, I would expect something spectacular, because now it's feeding into this lore. They wanted it to be, the same hilt as Jason's hilt. It has to be something spectacular. And he had built a very unusual looking weapon before. It was like a gun and a lightsaber together. So I would be expecting, like something very unusual for him. Maybe he just wants to go with a more traditional flair. But his attitude, I really liked. This actually was one part that I did like, was when and I did pull up a picture, but it's not large enough for us to really see it nicely. When Ezra is with Huyang and he's building the lightsaber, and I know you remember the scene, and I'm sorry it's small, but I couldn't find one that was bigger. And he's, he builds the lightsaber, and you can immediately see the connection between Huyang and Ezra. Catherine, it's like they're connected. They're tight, Catherine. They've never met each other. And Sabine is watching from the sidelines. And you can hear Huyang kind of, I guess, maybe praise or just, speak to Ezra in a certain way. And Sabine, he says something to Ezra, and Sabine does not care for what she's hearing. She kind of walks away. What did you think about, essentially, it looked like she was maybe a little jealous or wished that Huyang spoke to her that way. What did you think about that?
Well, I think it was instigated by the fact that he told him that Kanan Jarrus was his master. He's like, oh, Caleb Dune. And that gave him the idea to share some of Kanan's stuff with him. And he's like, oh, if you're Kanan's apprentice, that must mean you think like this, because he's got all that memories, memorized. Whereas with Sabine, all he knows is that Ahsoka abandoned her because of, X, Y, and Z reasons. That, oh, you have a lot of hate and this is going to be vengeance, which is why he's being more hostile towards Sabine, because Ahsoka is the one who geared him to think that way. Whereas with Caleb, or with Ezra, he's thinking, oh, your master was Caleb Dune. That's honorable, blah, blah. So he's being a lot nicer with him, and that's what Sabine's kind of annoyed by, because Huyang wasn't really being patient with her or kind with her, but he's going to do that with Ezra.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. I know I shouldn't have enjoyed it, but I thought that it did kind of demonstrate the notion of the importance of the training, even if it was, let's say, it was just Kanan, and he only had his master. They didn't have a connection to the temple or anybody else. But the training that Kanan had was strong enough to give, I'm saying the wrong name, Ezra's, what he needed as a Jedi, and that reinforcement. It was so important in order for him to understand the discipline of it all, which is something, I guess, Sabine just doesn't have, or if Ahsoka was trying to impart it on her, even with Huyang's help, it wasn't something that Sabine was able to do. So my question to you, and of course, everybody's wondering this, of course, we saw Sabine look like she had some kind of force abilities. What is her force journey going to be like, knowing she has these limitations already, Catherine, in your opinion?
Well, the thing is, Sabine, I mean, they've railroaded that character so much in this season that I don't really care what goes. Like, she can't be redeemed at this point. I'm sorry, but it's like, you can't. Again, we've seen her journey in the original Rebels series. I didn't believe from her performance from the actress's performance, Natasha, that she missed Ezra that badly that she would be willing to jeopardize it like this, and now they want us to invest in her becoming with the Force, and it's like I'm not really buying it. So I'm not what she does or what she becomes better. Maybe not. They haven't really given us any hints, but I'm not really that enthused anymore. It's like that, and again, there's no regret, no remorse. Oh, at least Ezra got home. It's like, and I'm supposed to care about Ahsoka maybe renewing your training. It's like, should you be trained at this point? It's like making all these bad decisions and no, I don't know.
Yeah, it is something to think about, but I think it could cause problems, and of course, in the sense of now that she knows she does have this ability, like what is her responsibility of using it? And I'm not quite clear. Yes, I admitted that I did want to see, this Real Housewives version of the show with Ahsoka and Ezra and Sabine, and someone saying, Sabine, you gave up everything to go see this guy, and Ahsoka would say, you went with the enemy, and Sabine would say, something like that, and then it would get really nasty, and Ezra would be like, what are you guys talking about? Just chill out, and Sabine would say, I don't like how chill you are, like just like this fantasy episode, or the meme, where she's screaming at the cat, and it would be Huyang holding back Ahsoka, right?
Yeah.
And the cat would be Sabine, and Ahsoka would say, you went with the enemy, and Sabine would say, I'd make the same decision again, bitch, or some shit like that, I admit I wanted that. I wanted to see that tension. So it felt very unnatural when Ahsoka showed up, and she was just, like, Sabine, hey, what's just another day, right, in the galaxy, yo? Just another day. I mean, did something happen? This is just my speculative question. Did something happen when you go from one galaxy to another?
Yes, because we saw from the Purgle traveling through hyperspace, which I'm still not on board with, that it's a more tie-dye appearance than, straight blue streaks. And just the other thing is, like, Ezra, have you learned anything about this planet's role in this galaxy, or what other planet, anything out here? Has there been any other interstellar travel around here since you've been here? Nothing. Crickets. Okay. It's like like, yeah. Thrawn, have you just stayed camped out in the atmosphere? Like, it looks like the windows have been repaired, or maybe not. Maybe you couldn't. Well, they had to have been repaired because they go into orbit. So it's like, have you tried to explore? Because the issue is that his hyperdrive is not strong enough to jump between galaxies, but he can jump between planets.
His ship isn't strong enough to, like, travel around, do an orbit. It looks like a hoopty. That ship looks like it's about to fall apart if they bump into something. I mean, come on.
He could travel to another planet and just orbit it or something, to do something. It's like they're just kind of camping, but he's prepared to do an entire intergalactic or extragalactic jump with the thing. So I guess they've kind of repaired it, and it's like, where did they repair it? Like, where did they get the raw material? Even if the raw materials are in the planet, where's the infrastructure that they use to actually do that? And why are all the stormtroopers looking like zombies or something, whereas even before they became actual zombies, whereas he's like kind of ship shape? It's like, what's that about? It's like,
yeah, I still am not comfortable that they made Thrawn look the way he did. I still think he should have been, because he was sexy looking. Like, he had this very seductive look about him, and he would kind of enter the room in Rebels. Of course, this is Dave Filoni's interpretation of him. He had that kind of, like, a little bit of, I'm going to read your mind. I can't read your mind, but I feel like I can read you by looking at you. And he would do that. And we didn't get that, especially when he confronts Sabine, and he says, you decided to risk the whole galaxy for this? And she's like, well, you wouldn't understand. And I'm like, no, I think he understands why, because he can read you. He's Thrawn. Like, he knows things. He's able to do that. But he felt like he had to try and ease that out of her. Whereas Baylan's approach was, look, I know you want to see Ezra. I'll take you there, and I don't know whether Baylan would have gone any further with it. Let's say if he stuck around and he didn't have this other quest, Baylan might have, looked at her as somebody who was, I don't know what he would have done, but I just really, she almost feels as if, she's lost, and this motivation to see him as a friend, which none of us believe, just isn't true. Like it's really just, I can't get over how they are saying that it's because they're friends. And because I got to tell you, I don't know whether I would go that far. It would have to be somebody that I loved so much, Catherine. I would have had to love that man.
It's the will of the Force. Like in the Attack of the Clones, when Padme just conveniently turns to Anakin and says, "I truly, deeply love you. Before we die, I want you to know." I'm like, where's this coming from? It's like, and so, like, Baylan wasn't even going to kill her when Thrawn told her to. He was just, because he knew that Thrawn didn't like him, and he got what he wanted out of it. He got to Peridia. They took off, and he was trying to tell Hati and break it to her lightly that this is not why I came here. There's extra power here. When she decided she didn't want to listen, he's like, okay, I put out the feelers. You're not interested, so I'm going to go now. Because he was not interested in killing, because he had a sense of honor. Like, he wasn't going to kill Sabine. He wasn't going to even think about harming a hair on her head until the deal was finished. And so he's upset that Hati wasn't going to honor that either. So I don't think he would have taken that far either. But no, Thrawn's right. He doesn't. Anybody could read her at that point that you jeopardize the galaxy for this. It's like, okay.
Well, I am going to say that I think that these characters were an interesting mess in this series. And if we removed half of them, we would have maybe had a more fulfilling show. I don't know whether, as much as I liked seeing Hera, Catherine, I think that she was not needed in the show at all. Neither was her son. I love the kid is adorable, not needed. Just eliminate that hole where I have to go and help us. So, like, she didn't need her help at all. Like, this was ridiculous.
Yeah, jettison the whole subplot about the map. Come up with something other than the hyperspace ring, maybe, because I mean, they didn't really sell us on, like, it was just a casual thing that they built and off they go. And it's like, well, the unknown regions are called unknown because they're very difficult to traverse. But she's able to build this thing that could just go into another galaxy, meaning there had to be blueprints and instructions on how to build these things. Well, then who has gone into these other galaxies before to even build this? Somebody would have had to use it sometime in the past. And there's no information on that either. Like, maybe try and use witch's magic to get out there, maybe, or something, like, take advantage of that. And just get to Peridia much sooner in the series so you could spend the bulk of your time there finding out what's been going on. Since it's true, Hera didn't really have anything to do with the show, and Ahsoka barely had anything to do with the show.
And my final point that I was going to say, and I talked a lot about this because when they talked about the unknown regions of the galaxy, my first thought immediately was Zeb, knowing that he wanted to save his civilization. They found a way to hide away from the Empire. It was a special way of getting to whatever planet they were going to. I liked that storyline, Catherine. I liked it a lot. I liked that Zeb was able to keep, his people, safe and away from the eyes of the galaxy of the Empire. And I thought to myself, somehow Zeb's got to be put into this because they had him in the Mandalorian, series. And he's the one person who actually understands how to get to different regions of the galaxy that no one else knows, because his people know a little bit more about the secrets of how to get from different places that are those unknown regions or the hidden regions. Catherine, were you surprised that we didn't see Zeb this season?
Yeah, because everybody, they were kind of hyping it up almost like this was the unofficial 5th season of Rebels, and as you show in the picture right there, he's in that guy's unit. So, and they showed up on the witch's planet to try and stop them from going to hyperspace. So why wasn't Zeb there? I mean, Zeb certainly would have wanted to go on the mission. And I assume he'll be in wherever they choose to continue with the story, whether it's Mandalorian season 4, a second season of Ahsoka, or the movie. He will definitely be there for sure. He's got to be at that point. But it was odd that, to your point, if you're not going to really use Hera in any meaningful way, then why is she here? If you're going to go out of your way to include her in these arbitrary scenes, then why not have Zeb there? So it's just, yeah.
Why didn't they give Hera something to actually do? Why didn't they do that, you think?
I think it seems like the only thing we get out of her being there is we explain through her subplot why the New Republic doesn't help, which is sheer incompetence. But you don't even need her for that, really. And then we see that Jason is more in touch with the Force than she knew, because he's able to hear Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds when Hera can't. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but we never come back to it or come back to him in the series, or it's just like he just disappears. So it wasn't really needed, and like, why do we need to see a scene of Mon Mothma just sitting there watching this junior senator kind of chew him out and they do not? It's like, why is this here? Because they keep showing the New Republic as being incompetent. Because as we know from the backstory or the general story of the sequel trilogy is that Leia had to go off and go rogue and start a resistance because they weren't taking anything seriously that they were saying, and we're seeing that here, sowing the seeds of the incompetence. But why are they this incompetent? It's like they know there's an Imperial remnant. Why aren't they investigating it and hunting it down and putting a stop to it? Well, we don't really know. So, and again, some of it comes down to like animation. Well, we want to have the characters there because it'll look cool to have them there. Or maybe they didn't bring in Zeb because of budgeting reasons. So, like in terms of the cost or the CG there, so which might have a lot to do with it too, perhaps.
Yeah, he looked incredible in The Mandalorian season 3, and I really was excited to see him there. I thought he was incredibly interesting character in Rebels, and his species, his people were and their culture incredibly interesting. And he had incredible chemistry with Ezra. And I almost wished that he and Ezra were the two people who had gone off together when Ezra kind of hightailed it out of there with the Purgles. So this solo journey for Ezra, I think one of the things that I think I would have really kind of solidified his character for me is if he was so altered when they found him that almost like you couldn't even understand him. And when I say that, I just mean that he had reached another plane of the Force or something like that, where his level of understanding and communication was so different now in what he interprets himself as a Jedi, as a Force user. That would have been very interesting to see him more on that level, because what else could he be doing on that planet? There is nothing else for him to do, Catherine. And I think if he had gone through a transformation like that, where he had been so altered through meditation, whatever, and been able to kind of reinvent himself, because I just can't see him being the same happy-go-lucky guy he was 10 years ago. He's a man now, for heaven's sake, Catherine, and he's not going to be the same person.
Well, and also, like he says, he didn't know where they were going when they took off. And so he's just kind of content. And like I mentioned earlier, it's like there's no psychological change. There's no intended interest in. He might have explored and seen the Mortis stuff, but he doesn't bring it up or anything. And maybe they'll carry that on into the next season, because technically he might bring it up, but it still just feels like, again, there's no sense of character growth. He's just chill. It's like he's the same guy, not as happy-go-lucky, so to speak, or sort of, but it's like, oh, hi, guys. Like, it's been like maybe a week or two. Let's, off we go.
Well, Catherine, anything else you'd like to say about the series that we have not hit on? Because we did talk about a lot in this past hour, but if there's anything else that you want to make a point of or discuss, let me know. Let us know, because I didn't hit every point of things that I saw, but just some things that really stood out to me about the series that were unusual, unexpected, and maybe just not quite what I thought they should have been.
I think we kind of covered it, because it's like, but again, the big one for me is just the fact that if the heroes don't care about the failure, then why should we? And that it doesn't feel like you're doing the inverse of the end of season 4. It doesn't feel dramatic at all. The fact that the hero, like even when Thrawn is talking to Ahsoka over the intercom at the very end, right before they make the jump to hyperspace, she's just kind of blasé listening to it, like, oh, no big deal. It's like, really? It's like you failed in the most supreme way possible, and you're just once, and then oh right, the final moment when she's on the planet and Anakin's Force Ghost is watching her, and I think the implication is that she could see him, but Sabine couldn't. And Anakin's just kind of content watching her. And again, I don't think that was Anakin's Force Ghost in the World Between Worlds. I think that was like, again, she was thinking about what Baylan had said to her, and so she kind of sees that. Whereas here, he shows up and he's watching her, but he's not going to talk to her. And he's sort of content because we see the Morai flying off in the direction of Mortis. So I think, as I've always said, that Ahsoka is going to be the daughter of Mortis at some point. And that's where her story is going to end. And maybe Anakin knows that. Because they haven't said if the Force Ghosts are capable of foresight. Maybe, maybe not. But he's kind of content And so she's just like, oh, I guess we were meant to be here. And it's like, well, yeah, you're meant to be here because you're going to end up on Mortis. That's where you're going. Your journey seems to be clearly going. But the idea that she just writes it off and backs up what Sabine said, oh, at least we sent Ezra home, and she reassures her of that. Oh, you did finish the mission. You sent Ezra home. It's like, that wasn't the mission. It's like the mission was to stop the enemy from bringing Thrawn back and whatever that, and you failed that mission. And so, and then they're just kind of, oh, I guess it's right that we're here with these the Na'ti doing nothing. So it's like, okay, I mean, for sure they're going to have another conflict with Hati and the bandits, and who knows? Maybe we'll learn more about those bandits. Like I speculated earlier, that they might be Night Brothers. We don't know that. They might be.
The bandit sounds like a band or something.
Exactly, and so that'll be something to deal with. And Baylan, I'm convinced that they will recast that role because that story is not finished, and they kind of have to finish it. So how many years we have to wait to get the next continuation? Who knows? I know they were supposed to start filming Mandalorian season 4 last month, but the strikes were still going on. So, and who knows how much of Mandalorian season 4, which we know had been written for years now, had any relevance to the Ahsoka show per se. It might not have. So we'll see. But so far, just watching it, I just don't get, because this feels at times like an outsider wrote it, but it wasn't. It was Dave, and I'm sure a whole crew of uncredited staff writers. But it's like, Dave, these are your characters. This is your story. Why is it that you're capable of infusing so much more emotion and drama and character arcs into the cartoon, but not carrying that over into a series, which frankly is written a lot like a cartoon, and yet it doesn't have any of that gravitas or sense which it really should have.
Yeah, I agree. And it was surprising that we didn't get those moments. Although I thought I had a moment when she gave over that Wayfinder, but apparently she had no choice. And that really took a lot of, you know what, this show is missing mojo. That's what I had said. It feels like Ahsoka doesn't have her mojo. And she's a character that has a lot of mojo. I mean, her nickname was Snips. This is a character that's snarky. She's very, she's got a little bit of a spice to her. And, I'm sorry, but this was a much watered down version of a character that we know and love. So, but let's see what happens. Catherine, let's see what happens when you and I come back to review the next season. Or, Catherine and I are going to be back talking more Star Wars as more things come out. Catherine, I want to thank you for being here as always. And Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me at Slice Night on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Phantasmagorium show. Thanks, Tom, for putting the link down there. And starting this Thursday at 7 Pacific and every Thursday thereafter at 7 Pacific, Scott and I will be doing a dive onto the Fargo movie and TV show universe, which will include our review of the upcoming season 5, which will run from November 21st through January 16th. So that will be a very fun series to do a big dive on.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing, guys. Make sure you check out Catherine on the Phantasmagorium show. Here's the link here. I think I have some other links for her as well. The Unifying Force.
Yes. Yeah, that as well.
I think that's all in the description of the video. So do check out Catherine there as well. Also check out Tom Jr. Jackson. I'm looking for your link. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Positive Fandom, guys. Please like and subscribe to it. We are on the Bur Network, but I also stream on my YouTube channel as well. I would appreciate that. And Tom, do you have your link, Tom? I just want to make sure I put that up. If you don't mind, guys, Tom Jr. Jackson is our moderator, collaborator, and good friend of the Bur Network family. We are all goof people and wouldn't be able to do any of this without Tom being there. He may not be able to get it there, but do check out Tom Jr. Jackson's YouTube channel, like and subscribe, and support the creators here that we have on YouTube. Yeah, show some support, guys. Catherine, it's been such a pleasure as usual doing these reviews with you, and I look forward to doing many more, guys. Catherine has her own show called Cat's Corner right here on the Bur Network as well. That will be coming back soon, and of course, you're going to see Catherine on different shows here on the Bur Network as well. And it's such a pleasure, Catherine, as I said, as always, to have you here. I want to thank everybody in the chat for giving us your opinions. Some of you loved it. Some of you didn't love it. Everything. Thank you for expressing your opinions. They all really do mean a lot here on the network. And guys, remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.